This overview of the midterm is hopefully going to help you do better than if you didn't watch it. So let's start. Question number 1 is from chapter 5. And in this question, I ask you to discuss the history of anti-sodomy laws, which are sodomy laws in the text. Be sure to include the historical reasons why these laws were enacted. Okay, so make sure that for the first part of this question, you describe in full the history of those anti-sodomy laws. There's a very good discussion in the text, so make sure you review that. Also, make sure that you include the historical reasons for why these laws were enacted. Explain the current global stance regarding sodomy. Okay, so when we look globally at sodomy, how do various countries view sodomy? How do they treat it? Is it a criminal violation or not? So make sure you're giving the global overview of how countries view sodomy. Discuss the difference between sex work and sex trafficking. In your opinion, should the U.S. legalize prostitution? Okay, so again, there's a difference between the two. Make sure you describe the difference, give an example for each one, and then your own opinion about whether or not the U.S. should legalize prostitution. Always support your ideas. Question 1. Now we move on to question 2. Question 2 is from chapter 7. Discuss how host societies construct immigrants and immigration as social problems. So remember, there's a discussion in the text that very clearly describes how host societies, that is, places where immigrants go to, how they treat those immigrants and how they think of those immigrants. In your opinion, how does the U.S. view immigrants? Okay, so this is what you see based on what you see and what you know about how many Americans view immigrants. Discuss the push and pull factors of immigration and give examples. I had you write a paper about push and pull factors of your own, so I'm asking here generally, what are the push and pull factors? Are there any circumstances under which you would consider leaving the U.S.? Why or why not? Again, you have some idea of that because I had you write about that in a paper. Identify the unique challenges immigrants face when they immigrate to the U.S. Again, this is generally, what are those challenges? In your opinion, do some immigrants have more obstacles than other immigrants? And again, this is based upon your opinion, what you know, etc. Question number 3 is from chapter 8. Analyze how modern production and consumption patterns contribute to environmental problems in the U.S. There's a lot of information in the text about the production of the things that we use and how we consume things, and how that does contribute to the environmental problems we have in the U.S. Discuss the hidden social costs of energy production and identify the populations that are most affected. Again, in the text, there's some very good information about costs. There are costs of energy production. And some populations, unfortunately, are more disadvantaged than other populations as a result of this production. So make sure you go into detail about that. Explain how climate change is both an environmental and a social problem. Okay, so we know that climate change is an environmental problem, but how also is it a social problem? There is a discussion in the text about that as well. Explain what environmental justice is and discuss efforts to reduce the harmful effects of climate change on marginalized communities. Okay, so make sure that as you're going through and studying, you're making yourself an outline so that at the very least, you know, if you receive question number 3, you will have an idea of what information you will provide for each part of the prompt. In fact, do that for, of course, all of the questions. Question number 4, discuss the relationship between deviance and crime and explain how something might be deviant but not criminal. So remember that all crimes are deviant behavior. but not all deviant behavior are crimes. For example, adultery is considered a deviant behavior because it's against our moral values, but it's not criminal. Okay, so that's an example of what I'm talking about. So make sure that you review that section. Describe how the wealth gap in the criminal justice system works regarding the bail system. There is a information in the text, as well as information in a couple of the videos that are in the module for Chapter 9. So make sure you review those and you identify what some of those issues are. Finally, explain how poverty, race, and gender can contribute to the unfair treatment of some people in the criminal justice system. Okay, again, lots of information there about, in particular, how the bail system affects people who are low income or who live in poverty. But as well, race and gender also can influence the treatment that some people have when they're going through the criminal justice system. So be sure always to give examples to support your discussion. And then finally, the last question comes from Chapter 10. Discuss how World War II changed the perception of war among Americans. Okay. There's some information in the text about how Americans viewed what was going on in Europe before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and then after that, how people felt about joining in with what was going on in Europe, as well as fighting the front on the Pacific side. Explain how the U.S. and other countries differ in war preparation. Okay, there's lots of information in the text about how much money is put into military preparations, defense spending versus other countries, and what that means then for the societies in each of those countries, and how much money then the country may have or may not have to spend on its citizens. Discuss the social and individual impacts of war. Support your discussion with examples. Okay, so again, there are social impacts of war, but also individual impacts for people who have family members fighting in wars, for the individuals themselves who are fighting, etc. In your opinion, what types of wars are just wars? That is, wars that we should fight. Give at least 2 examples to explain your why these are examples of just wars. That is it. Again, please make sure that you review the sections of the text and other resources in the modules for these chapters. I suggest you outline. Of course, some students will write out the full answer to each question so that when they log in, they can just copy and paste their full answer into the submission box and be done with it. Those are students who typically want an A. It's not cheating because they did their own work. They're just being prepared. But you're your own person. You know how you study best and what works best for you. But I guarantee if you study these questions and you are prepared, you will do well.